Okay, welcome back, everybody, and thank you for coming. And I want to really extend a word of gratitude to Dr. Marian for that presentation because, in many ways, she's anticipated much of what I wanted to say. So she's one step ahead, and we'll try to pick up on some of the themes. And I'm hoping that this session, want it to be more of an interactive session than a lecture. So I am going to really just walk through a few slides here, and then invite us to gather in small clusters and talk a little bit about dreams. All right. Dreaming up ministries of liberation and flourishing. We know the challenges that we face. I want to invite us to consider this proposition. Dreams are like classrooms. And when we are in a dream, we are learning. And we're training not only our brains, but we're training other body parts how to process information, including the heart, including the lungs, including the kidneys, including various body parts, which are doing different sorts of things. And I want to invite us to consider this in the context of the question, which is, how do we dream up ministries that will allow for us to do the kind of liberation work that we are all committed to doing? And I want to use Psalm 126 as an example. So it says, when the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dream. So this is a psalmist who is imagining restoration, post-exilic. Disaster has happened, the trauma is happening, and they are imagining restoration as dream work. Or maybe they are imagining the dream space as a space that actually teaches them how to do that work of restoration. So what might that mean for us to consider the dream space? This psalm is also generally considered to be one of the songs of ascent, and we will talk about that in a minute. But I just want to share this quote with you. A Zulu saying, if they don't dream, I cannot heal them. If they don't dream, I cannot heal them. I believe that we all dream. The question for us is, how do we step into that dream space in a way that allows us to see it as a pedagogical space, a place where pedagogy actually happens? And what kind of pedagogy happens in a dream? Where we encounter things that are familiar, things that are unfamiliar. How we are capable of flying in our dreams. So there's a kind of aerodynamic quality to the dream space. Or maybe we can, like in the biblical story, see a ladder like Jacob that connects heaven and earth. There is a technology that goes with the dream. So then the question becomes, what are the kinds of technologies that we need in order to do this dream work? This is a quote from a piece that was written about post-colonial dreams, and it says that it is common practice in some societies not to rouse a dreamer suddenly. If it is absolutely necessary, it must be done gradually, for the soul, being away, might not return in time. If the soul should be detained, the dreamer so deprived of the vital principle will fall sick and die. So, where are we? Are we waking up? Are we fully awake? Are we woke? Are we woke? Is it the case that the systems that we're trying to shift, the systems that produce injustice and oppression, have they detained part of our soul in a strange place? So that we have to think about pedagogy, how we wake up from the nightmares, from the dreams, the nightmares. So, because if it is the case that if you wake someone up too soon, you might rupture. But if you wait too long, what happens to that person? They're trapped in that space of a nightmare. And it becomes something like what the Irish poet James Joyce in his book Ulysses talked about. History is a nightmare from which I am trying to awake. Right? So, which means that we find ourselves in a place where we are constantly trying to do is dream work. So Psalm 126 talked about ascent, the Psalms of ascent, going up, rising up. And there are ways, multiple ways of thinking about that in terms of musical notes, in terms of songs of praise, even in terms of the olah, the burnt offering, which conjures a very difficult image, a very tough image. The whole thing is burned up. Pilgrimage, or even the rising of the subterranean waters. And as Dr. Medran was talking about streams and digging wells and watering trees, and the idea that trees are our ancestors, that they have the capacity to be our ancestors. I was thinking about a colleague who is from Senegal talks about the baobab tree, which is another sort of really important tree that is considered to be the resting place for the ancestors, that's where the communal wisdom actually resides. So you have to go consult, talk to the tree, because the tree is the one that holds that communal wisdom and can generate the dream. Teach Me Dreams is, so these are just a couple of books to mention here. Teach Me Dreams is a book that talks about sort of dream work during the revolutionary period in the United States, and in African-American literature, when humans could fly. Brings us into this dream space where you have to escape that structure, that institution, and develop this capacity to fly, which puts us perhaps in dialogue with this biblical story of the catastrophe of Noah's time. That if this story wants us to resist that Noah was the only righteous person in the whole world, was the only righteous person. If we push past that, then we find ourselves interacting with two birds, the raven and the dove. Those are the two creatures that will get that creation out of that ark, because you cannot stay in there forever. You have to reintegrate the world. And the first creatures that leave the ark are the birds. So the raven goes and flies and flies and flies and flies. There's so much work that's been done on the importance of the raven. Then the dove goes, comes, and then goes. And it says in the evening time, it brought back an olive branch, the tree, right? The Hebrew for evening time can be translated the time of the raven. Yes. Which means that we then find ourselves in this dream space back to the tree, reconnecting back to the tree, because the tree is the thing that helps us to move away from this highly anthropocentric reading of what is happening, as if all of creation serves the purposes of humans alone. One other is Christina Sharp's work, In the Wake. so that we are invited to do wake work. How do we wake up? And when I first read this, I was like, I read it a second time. So she's writing this work and talks to a marine biologist who says that, human blood as salt, when it enters the ocean, it stays there. It's called residence time. And it says that it takes 260 million years for all of it to circulate, which means if you go to the ocean, what is there? And especially for sort of thinking about the transatlantic slave trade, to encounter the water, which is, again, part of what happens in the liberation story. They are constantly in watery space and coming out, both in the Nile and then in the Red Sea and then in the Jordan. And it carries over into the New Testament. Jesus has to go into the water and come back. Something about engaging that watery space is generative for thinking about dreams and dreaming. So how do we imagine this? Dr. Medren mentioned that I did some work with the Waba. So here's where I want to just share this a little bit, and then we'll break into groups and talk about how we all imagine dreaming and the generative work. So I, along with other faculty, we approached the Waba Center and asked them if they would fund a project which we called Dreaming Up Pedagogies That Heal. And they said yes. And so we came together and we decided that we would go and visit some sites. So the activities included picking 3 sites. One, go to a museum and think about the ways in which knowledge and important figures are mentioned in the museum. And then ask yourself the question, how does that particular site inspire you to dream? What is the connection, if any, between that particular site and dreaming? And what kinds of dreams do you encounter in that space? The second was to go to a religious site, a mosque, a church, a temple, a tree, any religious site that has significance for you, and think about the importance of that religious site for your own dreaming. And the third was to go to a sports event, a play, something that gets to your sense of a fandom. I'm a fan of this, which means that it is not just your brain that is working, it's something else. Because when you are a fan, it's a different kind of energy that gets activated in your decision making. So lean into that. What kinds of dreams emerge? And the exercise was, after those 3 visits, to write what we called parabolic narratives, answering the question, who is my neighbor? That the dream world is like a parable that is always inviting us to consider who is our neighbor. Sometimes we know them, sometimes we don't know them. Sometimes they are ancestors, sometimes they are children. Sometimes they are humans, sometimes they are animals. It is an interspecies space. So to do this, we had to do those reflections and then sit and share with one another, which is where we came up with the idea of co-dreaming. The only way that my dream really has the capacity to be sustainable is if I have a co-dreamer who is basically helping refine, develop that dream. And we brought in some professionals, experts in the field of dreaming, one of whom is an ancestor that was named here this morning, Barbara Holmes, who wrote a lot about dreams. So we reached out to Dr. Holmes and said, we are meeting and we have this gathering, we're doing this work. Would you be willing to be a consultant and to talk with us about your own work around dreaming? She said yes. So we planned this event and we're sitting in Atlanta and she was supposed to Zoom in from Florida. 2 days before we were meeting, I sent her an email, Dr. Holmes, we're so excited about you coming. And she said, yes, I am excited. Then I sent another email. So here is the Zoom link, and you will join us. No response. So the day of the meeting, we're sitting there and we're like, is Dr. Holmes going to show up? And so we start to develop an alternative. What if she doesn't show up? The tech person comes in and asks me, do you want me to set up the Zoom just in case? I'm like, okay, yeah. So the Zoom was set up and we're sitting there 5 minutes before the time that we were supposed to begin. We had plan B ready to go. Boom, she appears on the screen. Then I started to wonder. She had said yes. Then I sent for the other email saying, here's the thing, and she didn't reply to that. Why did I assume that she wouldn't after she had said yes? That there is a certain level where the communication seemed to have failed. But even at that level of supposed failure or in communication, there was another level where the communication remained true because she had said yes. The dream world is the world where we learn to deal with the thing that is yes, and the moments where it feels like there is miscommunication, where we encounter things that we are not familiar with, that make us nervous and anxious, or the traumas that come in, and then we have to dream how to respond to that. We finish up the project, had a podcast about it, and then whoever said, do you want to do part 2? And we're like, yes. Part 2 begins in January, and we will be going to the Alex Haley farm. Alex Haley, who wrote Roots, to basically think about what it means not just to be creative, but to create, and to create the worlds that are liberative. So dreaming of pedagogies that heal us. Let's now constitute groups of 4 or 5 and take a moment to think about what spaces do we need to create to foster our dreams? What are the processes that will help us dream better? What are the traumas that we need to recognize as we dream? And how do we heal? How do we heal? So let us constitute groups of 4, and we'll see how much time we have here. So if we can take about 20 minutes.
Yes.
It ends at 3:45. Oh, okay. Okay, with Q&A included, ends at 3:45. Okay, let's do 20 minutes. So we'll go till 3:30. So the questions are, what kinds of spaces do we need for dreaming? What are the processes that will foster our dreaming? What are the traumas that we need to be aware of? And how do we heal? So welcome back, everybody. I know the conversation is still ongoing. I apologize for interrupting, but I wanted to give us an opportunity to, in some ways, embody this work of shared dreaming or co-dreaming by just having people from the various groups say a little bit about some of your conversation. I know people online, I don't know if they were able to constitute a group online to be able to provide some reflections as well. It can be on any of the questions, any of the 4 questions. So because we don't have time to exhaust all 4. So what stood out for you in terms of thinking about dreaming? So, what are the spaces that help us dream? What are the processes that foster the dreaming? What kinds of traumas do we need to be aware of? And how do we heal? So those are the questions sort of to consider. And think about those conversations as part of the co-dreaming. That what we just experienced was a kind of co-dreaming. What stood out for you? Who might want to share some of the important points? Yes, please. Is there a microphone?
Hi. We talked a little bit about the fandom idea and how, one person talked about a volleyball game where everyone in this whole college arena just like stood up all at once. And I was talking about the Loons games, where it's this a beautifully multicultural arena full of all this amazing positive energy. We talked about No King's Day rallies. We talked about neighborhood groups. I feel like those places are little pockets of hope and shared emotion. And then I think that the dreaming piece is where we are not as focused. Like we might have these experiences together in these little pockets, but there isn't the sort of discipline or somebody who's asking the question, how can we be dreaming together? So that's what we had.
Wonderful. Thank you. Others from other groups?
I've been an active participant today. Think of your answer. I'll hand the microphone to you next. Inspired by both Sally and Sean's answers, my answer to the first question was to think of a metaphorical dream, thinking of the circumstances that I need in order to dream, pushing that metaphor further. I need shelter and peace, not being agitated, trying to go sleep, but peace, a peaceful mind. So in terms of circumstances, in order so that I could actually dream of what I could do, I need shelter and peace. And in my mind, the circumstances that lead to that. And also, in order to keep the dream, I need sacred orientation. Orientation to the sacred. Yes. Otherwise, the dream will become a nightmare. That's it.
Thank you. Others?
Hi, I was sharing that every time I walk through those 2 doors off of the parking lot, I feel like I'm entering a dream space. And I'm so was interested that you brought in the trauma piece to it, because I carry along the complex PTSD, so chronic PTSD with me. So there it is. And it actually is kind of triggered by social spaces. So here I'm walking through the doors into a space of really what's really about dreaming. And so that for me is like really strong. And then how to have my fellow students and faculty and this group here, my co-dreamers. It's just, it's a space I think then I can sort of be in more present.
I have always found dreams my dreams tend to be humorous
and they tend to give me guidance, but in a way that's funny enough that I'll listen to it, and that sort of upends my world a little bit. But I think one of the things that's required for those dreams is an openness to it, a curiosity about it. And I've actually come to, in the last few decades, I actually ask God when I'm at a pivot point and I've done as much thinking and as much talking to wise people as I can. I say, okay, I need a dream now. Please send it to me. And it's amazing how much that does happen. So I think curiosity and openness and seeking are part of it.
We talked a little bit about intention. This is T. Michael, by the way. That was Carolyn Pressler and Dottie Kvam, so thank you. The whole idea of intentional imagination, like you did earlier, and how we kind of move into this dream state. And it's something we teach at United through the Spiritual Direction Program, is like how to cultivate dream work in our direction conversations with others. And it's just it's another powerful tool that we can explore all the possibilities we have in our lives. So using imagination, dreaming of a different world, doing that in communal spaces, healing our traumas, finding release from the fear and from the different, prisons that people live in, is just another possibility, another opening up of our hearts and minds.
This is Jen Madrand. Our group had talked a little bit about what happens to us when we share our dreams with one another, and the sort of emotion that's a part of some of those experiences, the ways that our understandings of reality or those we're in community with shift when we hear their dreams, which sometimes can be terrors and nightmares.
Yeah.
And then we talked a little bit about the work of remembering a dream and retelling it, and the difficulty of that, and the difficulty sometimes of kind of articulating the fuzziness that some of us get from our dreams, whether it was when we were conscious or not. And so thinking with your talk earlier, Dr. Ngwa, thinking about our retelling of dreams in some ways as the work of Midrash.
Yeah.
That we're always sort of retelling that dream that we might not be able to retrieve in the exact form that it first came to us or came to someone else. But we kind of collectively can be a part of that work of telling and retelling it, or trying to.
And I was in Jen's group, and just to add on, it brought to mind the stanza in the hymn, "O God, our help in ages past," where it says, "We fly forgotten as a dream flies at opening day." That when we do come back to consciousness, it's more elusive, and it can fly away. And then we have to start the retelling.
Please say your name for the people online too. Thank you, Victoria Wagaki.
This is Bridget Weber. Yeah, our group, I think, was kind of focused on the idea of co-dreaming and how much we thought, how valuable we thought that is and how necessary it is. And something Io mentioned was just this phrase of, I got a crazy thought, and how to hold space for each other, which, requires a foundation of relationship and trust. And, so how do we create the conditions to have a trusting, supportive group that's willing to let us fully, or to, try our best to say something without pulling it apart, sort of in a more brutal way first, but allowing that to just sort of breathe.
I'm Claire Grimault. I was a graduate of 2014. I was just thinking about how I purchased for a nephew quotes from the Harry Potter books. I know we're not all super fans, but two different ideas actually from the headmaster said to Harry Potter, "It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live." And then in another whole other narrative, sort of uplifts dreams, saying, "For in dreams we enter a world that is entirely our own. Let them swim in the deepest ocean or glide over the highest clouds." So dreams can be, whether they're when we're sleeping or when we're imagining while we're fully awake, they do take sometimes our whole being into a new possibility and a new place. And I think it's just really, I'm in local church ministry, and I'm just thinking of one person who's recently been really dreaming on something, and I think wishes the whole congregation would come alongside them, right? And be with them in that dream. But how do we share a vision when it maybe starts within just one of us in a way that actually does bring along other people, and in a way that doesn't discount what every other person's experience or very different dream might be? And so I think dreaming within community is really challenging work.
Thank you all for that. Thank you all for sharing your reflections and thoughts about this concept of dreaming. A couple of things just to mention, that it is indeed the case. It is indeed the case that dreaming comes with a certain embodied experience. So when we're dreaming, something is happening to our bodies, whole body. And the invitation is to consider the ways in which there are multiple epistemologies at work in a dream world simultaneously. And because we are trained to think about the brain and its capacity to process as the highest form of our own excellence, we may not be able to sort of catch what else is happening, that element of curiosity or the unknown, or the wonder that often accompanies dreaming and imagining new things. And therefore, the invitation would be to consider how our ministerial practices, our classroom practices can foster wonder as an important space for thinking about the kinds of generative work that is necessary to grapple with the enormity of the challenges that our world faces. Because there is mystery that unfolds, because I also think that, it might be possible that dreams are like a prophylactic. They're training our bodies to deal with the trauma that is coming tomorrow. So when we're dreaming and we're trying to look for a historical analog that helps us understand it, it might be training us for something that is still to come. So then we have to develop the capacity to anticipate, to sort of think about, that's why I mentioned wonder as a way of thinking about our own theological education in a world that is rapidly changing, in a world where technology is moving so fast that we really don't quite have a grasp on what it is going to be tomorrow. People who work in the space of these dream technologies like AI are telling us that it is moving extremely fast. So then we have to think about how we prepare ourselves for the unknown and think about how we can respond. So that is the invitation, one invitation that I want to leave with us. And also to think about the consequences of forgetting. Some of those consequences can be positive, some of them can be quite severe. because we live also at a time when there is a suppression of knowledge. Certain things cannot be taught. Books are banned, which means there is an active forgetting that is being put into the ecosystem, into our consciousness. Erasure. And if you go to that, it says there's a Pharaoh who did not know. That epistemological gap opens up a space for oppression. So then, if we are going to answer the question, what does it mean to forget the dreamer? The one who did not remember, they did not remember the dreamer, right? Joseph was precisely the one that had all these dreams. So then part of what we are inviting is to think about the socio-political importance of forgetting and remembering. There are consequences to remembering, there are consequences to forgetting. And that part of the work that we are called to do is to inhabit that, fluid space, that liquid space of the dream world that really doesn't sit neatly with one or the other. The co-dreaming from, and I'll just finish here, Psalm 126, it says, the people go into joy because it says, God, you have done wonderful things, translation say, for us. It might be possible to translate, you have done wonderful things with us, which is the co-dreaming. So the psalmist is inviting the divine to be a co-dreamer with the community as they unfold, as they step into the future. And so might it be possible that when Jacob dreams, it is not Jacob dreaming, it's the earth that is dreaming, and he is a co-dreamer. Because it says the sun set, the sun went in, so the sun closed his eyes to sleep. And Jacob put his head on a rock, and then he dreamed. And he saw all these things. And the dreams are about the earth, they are about the ground. And so it might be possible, back to Dr. Medren's talk, to say the kind of liberative work that we are doing is one that says we have to be able to see that some of this work is how we develop the capacity to hear and to co-dream with the earth. Because the earth is dreaming, and we are invited to be co-dreamers. And that is what might foster a kind of liberative work that brings us all the way back to the beginning of our time today in chapel, where we can name the ways in which the land on which we stand has been holding a trauma for a long time. And when we talk about repentance, what that also means then is we are asking the land, what is your dream? And how do we align ourselves with that kind of work? So thank you for your time, and thank you for participating, for sharing your thoughts. This brings us to the conclusion of this session. Thank you so much.